Fyxer AI is one of today's fastest growing AI apps. In fact, it was just ranked number 7 on an Andreessen Horowitz report of the AI tools that startups are spending the most money on. One of the factors behind their success has been a lean, mean growth engineering team that started with 1 growth engineer and has now grown to 4 people. But what really caught my eye is that this 4-person team is shipping something like 20 experiments every week, thanks to some simple AI-enabled workflows. I knew we had to find out exactly how they're doing that, so I called up Fyxer's lead growth engineer, Kameron Tanseli, to ask him how the growth engineering team there is structured and how they're using AI to hit such an impressive velocity. I'm Ryan Lucht, and you're watching Outperform. All right, so we should probably just start with a bit of introduction and background before we get to the Fyxer AI story, and have you tell us a little bit about how you got into growth engineering and experimentation in the first place.
I started pretty young in the whole tech scene. If you imagine coding since I was 13 and then first tech job at 16. And it was around 16 reading, the Eric Ries Lean Startup book. And Before Our Work Week by Tim Ferriss, I was reading that and I was like, oh man, they're split testing their ideas and, they're using data to build these startups. I'm really this seems really cool. And I sort of looked at, the Groupon founder at that point was quite young as well, and running a very successful company. I was like, I could do this. Running companies is easy. I'll just join a company first and then try and figure it out from there. So 2 years of dev agency sort of stuff, and then moved from that life to startup life in London. Joined a very, very early stage startup and always liked that environment. So that would be a trend. A company called Motivi, where I was basically the sole front end engineer there and did a bunch of more feature work. And I did that for 2 more jobs until I was sort of screw this, I'm going to go do the startup thing now. And went and applied for Zinc VC, which is a do-good VC foundation. And didn't get through with that. But in the process of doing that, joined Trade.ai as a growth engineer. Was Trade.io back then, but now everything's AI. And that was my first sort of taste of, okay, there's this role. It's sort of like being a technical founder and a marketer, and I can do A/B testing. And that flourished into, going back into a smaller company from Trey, which was 300 people, back down to 10 people with catalog, and then dipping my toe into Newman and ecom and B2C, and doing a stint there of being a PM and a experimentation analyst. And then finally jumping back into growth engineering and feeling like I reached my sort of limit at Newman after scaling their referral program to a good chunk of their new users in that B2C world, and moved to Fyxer in January this year. And it's been sort of plain sailing since then, taken us from 1 to I think 16 million as of last week.
That's incredible. I mean, it's really wild, the pace of growth at startups now in this sort of AI native age. Still hard for me to wrap my head around. But okay, so a bunch of roles, kind of always circling this confluence of some engineering capabilities, this very data-driven PM/growth mindset, combining those and just growing the companies that you were part of. That brings us to the growth engineering team that you've been building at Fyxer AI. Tell us a little bit. I imagine a bunch of people listening are familiar with the term growth engineering and the implications, but maybe for those who aren't, give us a bit of the, what is the team, who's on it, what are you working on?
70% of the code at the end of the year is mainly where a product engineer is going to be. Growth engineer, 30%. We're here to optimize flows, stages of the funnel. Product engineers mainly optimizing features and going deep on those those sorts of things. I'd say that's mostly the key difference. We're all trying to optimize products at the end of the day, but we approach it differently without going too much into it. A/B tests and all. Um, and with that, growth engineering at Fyxer is probably it the role in its purest form. So the way we sort of structure the team is very decentralized. So we have a growth engineer at each stage of the funnel. So we've got an acquisition one, onboarding, and then me on sort of retention and PLG features, and then we've got a monetization growth engineer. And that sort of allows us to say, you are the CEO of this stage of the funnel, go and run experiments and optimize it. And also at the same time, you're not going to have that overlap. You know, when you're running lots of A/B tests, the worst thing you can do is cancel out or start interfering with someone else's A/B test. So you can really stop a lot of collisions by having like clear cutoff of where the growth engineers are working. You know, one might be onboarding flow, the other marketing side and sign up. So that's sort of, and we meet sort of once a week, go through what are we running, what is the velocity like, are we stuck on anything, and then we bring like growth engineering principles. But again, it's very much I'm not coming in and being like, these are the things we need to run. There's no PMs. It's hiring very T-shaped developers who we trust to sort of go after it and optimize those metrics.
Yeah. Can you talk a little bit about the balance of engineering versus growth skills that you're looking for someone in this role? Like, what sort of relative level of coding competency are we talking about? What sort of relative level of that sort of growth PM mindset are you looking?
So the requirement for like being, let's say, I mean, the term cracked engineer has been thrown around quite a lot recently. Um, Being like a cracked engineer, you know, like the C++ kind of guys of like, oh, you know, I've optimized memory collection and these sorts of things. That's less of an importance for me with this role. It's more like if you can code obviously efficiently, you can build a UI, you can hook together API endpoints. You're sort of like a glue-ish developer. But you can create really nice UIs. You understand how to craft offers, these sorts of things. So I'd say the balance is very much 30-70 coding to like growth PM.
Yeah.
Um, and we test for that in the interview. Like the coding portion is actually quite small, of 20-30 minutes. Can you build like this paywall for me? And then describe how you're going to change it. And then the next stage of that is let's take this UI and spend an hour brainstorming because we really care about that part. Code is very cheap, but like actually getting people to use your product is the hard part nowadays. So that's the part that we optimize for.
Yeah. I think what's interesting to me is that a lot of people think of growth and engineering as very infrequently overlapping skill sets. Do you find that it's a hard role to hire for? Like, are good growth engineers kind of unicorns, or are there more people out there than one would assume who are good at doing?
Uh, my chief people officer here really dislikes hiring for growth engineers because at the start we were like, oh, it's easy. We'll get another me and another growth engineer that I brought from previous company. So it'll be fine. It took us months to the growth engineer number three, and then once you found number three, it sort of snowballed. But we put a lot of resources behind it to try and find the additional. It is what we find is the best growth engineers are previously founders who may have failed, like in their attempt or run out of funding, or just sold it and they're bored.
Mm-hmm.
Um, or they've worked very deeply in a marketing team, or obviously worked previously as a growth engineer or statistics engineer or some sort of discipline. If you can't find those, then the best thing to do is find an engineer that also has done another job. So if
Yeah.
you are an analyst and a software engineer, please talk to me. If you were a PM and an engineer, obviously great fit. Even designers who have then jumped into development, because there's that T shape of you can design a really good UI and the engineering, you just need to pull in a copywriter, let's say, or a CRO copywriter, or we
Yeah.
can like train that part for you, and now suddenly you're a growth engineer.
We had a very similar experience hiring for our product team at Epo, like building an experimentation platform and features like that. Where I, you know, I'm thinking of this because you called out the former founder profile. That was one that we really explicitly looked for because we wanted someone who had that sort of like ownership ability to, like you said, kind of be the CEO of a life cycle stage. In our case, it was be the CEO of a product and a new persona that we were, working with. But it was a super powerful way to kind of screen for candidates or otherwise, look for folks who led platform teams in-house maybe and wanted to come over and product manage from the vendor side. So that's cool. So one of the things that's caught my eye about the growth engineering team at Fyxer AI is that you guys are running a lot of experiments, especially relative to the size of the team. So I kind of understand, or I can guess at the metrics that each growth engineer owns, right? They're responsible for acquisition, they're responsible for retention. But it seems like you really value this, velocity, shipping fast, moving fast ethos. I'm kind of curious how you personally or how Fyxer AI as an organization like came to the conclusion that that was important and something to work towards.
When I first joined Fyxer in January, it was just me. And I took a previous model that worked at Newman, which is like complete transparency. So we post every experiment launch and result to a single Slack channel. And at the end of every week, we post a report where like, there's so many tests that we've done. And I sort of took trouble with the number of that I posted every week. I was like, okay, how can I get this number up one more next week? And with that came obviously AI automation, but it was basically me from January to June until we've hired our second growth engineer. And I think in that time, I ran probably more than 100 experiments. Uh,
Impressive.
yeah, to take us from 1 to 13. And it wasn't easy. I'm not going to say like, yeah, 100 experiments. Like it was very much like dedicated focus and also having the freedom to touch every part of the product. There wasn't going to be, I ran out of ideas in this place. And so posting numbers every week and we're getting to, I hit a max some weeks of like 8 or 9. I couldn't go past that, even with AI and these sorts of things that we'll talk about. And people just got used to that number. And then so when we onboarded our second growth engineer and I gave them the playbook of this is how I managed to hit, 8 per week. And they started doing the same sort of thing that we kept posting the numbers and the third join and the fourth. And then it sort of became, okay, we've got these 4 growth engineers, and we're doing a lot of velocity. The newer growth engineers maybe were gamifying that metric a little bit last
Okay.
month or two, to be candid. So we sort of take a step back and go, yes, we're very, very fast, even faster than most orgs. Now let's take each growth engineer and say, aim for 4 to 6. It's still a good metric to measure, like, are the team working incredibly hard each day? And we can challenge ourselves on that. And yes, we can squeeze people to get the extra 1 or 2. Like, have you thought about this? As you shipped 3 big things this week, and you shipped 2 small copy tests, or like these sorts of things. But really, I think on our race to 50 by the end of the year, with this many growth engineers now, there's less of a concern for like Herculean efforts and more just like, can we do bigger things that give us that 10, 20, 30% uplift that we can measure and ship?
Yeah, let's take a quick detour here because I think this is a pretty common point of contention or concern that people have with velocity as a measure is that it could start to be gamified in less than ideal ways. And I think there are a lot of people who, and this is my personal bias, I do think velocity is important, right? I think at the end of the day, because we seem to be relatively poor at predicting which ideas are going to work, it's important to try a lot of ideas. That doesn't necessarily mean that we want to randomly try things without any sort of like logic to what we're trying.
Yeah.
Um, and it sounds like that was very much like you were being intentional with the experiments that you were running when it was just you. But now it's okay, if people are being measured and incentivized solely on the number of experiments, how do we make sure that doesn't veer off track? It sounds like you've set a number that's basically based on capacity, essentially, to build and ship the experience. Is that right?
Yeah, I found generally that between the 4 and 6 number, I'm getting a good level of quality from the rest of the growth engineers.
Gotcha.
There's obviously some weeks when they can do more than that. Say if you're doing a bunch of back-endy sort of A/B tests, which are quick to implement but have far-reaching impact. Um, yeah, 4 to 6 seems to be the good capacity number. Any If it was 1 to 2, but they were incredibly large, that's obviously okay. We when we post the numbers, we also post t-shirt sizes next to each one
Mm-hmm.
at the end of the week. So we can show like even if you did lower, you still did big changes, and that's really important for us.
And that capacity is about both capacity to have thoughtful ideas to test and to go out and code treatments and launch experiments, right?
Yeah, the idea is you have super intelligence at your fingertips of like one of the best coding LMs and a company card to just go and spend on tokens, obviously. So you should be able to code these large features fairly quickly. And if you really think about Fyxer, the UI elements of it are very few because we're such an like back-end integration product, right? We're in your inbox, we're joining your meetings. Less of it is actually in the UI. So most of the testing is, top of funnel and maybe bottom of funnel as they come back.
So let's talk about the coding that you're referring to here, and sort of really heavily leveraging AI coding assistance tools, I presume. Can you give us a little peek into like what the tech stack looks like, or if it's not standardized, like what tools do your growth engineers seem to be reaching for most often? What seems to be really helpful? And maybe before we even get to specific tools, just like, do you have a framework of how you kind of conceptualize like how these fit into the larger day-to-day workflow of a growth engineer?
Yeah. I broke down using like a diagramming software from start to finish how I would go from idea to experiment, and then tried to sort of ideate which parts of it I could automate. Like, how can I save myself 1 or 2 minutes? And this was when I was just me. So 1 or 2 minutes was actually really important. So this was
Yeah.
good thinking for me to build a playbook. And where I sort of ended up was not some massive, these automation workflows that you see on LinkedIn, which are absolutely, it's not anything like that. We don't do any workflows at all, actually. We use MCPs a lot,
Okay.
and they're super useful because it's just plug and play and very easy to set someone up with that. And I generally took it as 3 parts. The first part is the sort of ideation, manual ticket writing agent, and you can give it a hypothesis, and there's a massive prompt that we have, which you give to a reasoning model, and that basically writes your experiment ticket for you and picks from the metrics, and sometimes you have to fix it, but most of the time it's clever enough to be like, yeah, a sign-up experiment, it should measure sign-up, and these are the guardrails. Um, so yeah, that talks to linear, and that calls the MCP and adds it as a ticket, assigns it to the person, the correct labels, and these sorts of things. And then we take that ticket and we go and use coding agents, and every developer at Fyxer has their own flavor. I'm big on Codex, both the wet and the new VS Code extension on CLI. And we generally share tips with each other. The biggest thing that I've found is generally Codex on the web can very easily clean up experiments. You just give it the feature flag key. I guess it's the same in FO. Use to identify the experiment, just go, please remove this and all code that powers it. And it does a pretty sweet job at cleaning up the entire experiment.
Yeah.
Before that would take, 20, 30 minutes, clean that up, PR, get it reviewed, like these sorts of things. So Codex Web, I can very quickly clean up 3 or 4 experiments at a time, even on my mobile. So wherever I am, I can clean up a test. And then the actual coding, we ask the AI to draft a plan, and we have markdown files which describe how feature flagging SDKs work and these sorts of things to give context to the AI, which is super important. It can then draft, and then we review the specs. And we do believe, I think it's consensus around most of the engineers here, is that spec-driven AI development is where it's going,
Hmm.
because we get far better outputs when we ask it to draft a plan, and we go, "Yep, that seems great. Everything seems cool. Okay, you added the feature flag. Let me review the code. Cool." It then goes into PR after we do the front end tweaks because AI isn't there yet, and I don't want purple in my UIs. We're going the blue color theme direction. We started as purple, not anymore. Uh, and then when it gets into PR, we have obviously there's the new Codex can review your PRs as well, but we use a tool called Greptile, which reviews our PRs and catches any issues. It's very, very good actually, of catching issues before they make it to prod, because the worst thing you can do for an experiment is have it into prod, set it live, and then boom, it's actually broken. You have to pull it, and that wastes a lot of time. And then when it gets to the results, we actually use a vision model with quite a nice prompt to actually take a screenshot of, we use Growthbook to have our results, just visualize it from a warehouse. We take a screenshot of that, give it to the vision model, and then it writes the results into a Slack message format, which we then paste into the experiments channel. And that used to
Nice.
take us 10, 15 minutes of manually going back and forth between the image and Slack to write it all and share it with the team.
So if you had to like estimate a before after, like doing growth engineering a year or two ago, and
Yeah.
the life cycle of an experiment to now, like what would you say is the maybe just percentage time savings as a result of having these sort of like 4 different stages of an AI enabled development workflow?
I can't give you percentage, but I can give you before and after
Sure.
of when Codex Web launched, which was May or something, like March or April. There was like a clear step change in a I have a velocity bar chart, and it was like night
Interesting.
and day difference of, I could get an extra 2 to 3 out, and that was the stepping stone to getting like
Yeah.
closer to, rather than doing like 3 to 4 per week.
So even like recently, this is you're seeing like pretty large step changes. This isn't just like you've been using Cursor for the last, year and a half and having AI help you with some code completion. It sounds like you're having AI coding tools really take a first pass from scratch and then you're working off of that.
Most of the If you consider, like, most of the experiments that we do is some change of a UI, some copy, maybe applying a Stripe coupon, these these sorts of things. Like, we should get more people to share call recordings. We should make a button that's more clear. The complexity of that is less to say like building an entire new app. And we know AI can build an entire new app. It should definitely be able to go and look at a React file and add a button that is flagged, right?
Yeah.
So there's no reason why, apart from maybe the UI parts, and obviously with time, AI will get into building really cool UI, and then I can just fire all the growth engineers, do it all myself. Uh, but until then, yeah, it's doing 85% of the work. And I have a few buddies in San Francisco and New York that are running companies, and they are, spinning up the 3 Claude codes and getting lots and lots of stuff done. So it's definitely a trend, and I'd say there's a big difference between the vibe coders and the people that just do the tab autocomplete in terms of output.
Sure. Yeah. But it sounds like, and I'm reading between the lines here, so correct me if I'm misrepresenting your view. You do still, at least for your workflow, and the current state of AI capabilities, you need to know what you're looking at
Yeah.
to some extent to look at the output and, fix things up before you ship it.
Yeah, I wouldn't advise a junior to just start vibe coding everything. Like I've been doing this 9 years now, so
Fair enough. Maybe we'll get there one day, but it
maybe
seems
we'll
like
get.
seems like the consensus is pretty clear that we're not quite there yet. Um, that's all super cool and a pretty straightforward framework for how you're using these things, right? Like I could picture in my head going back to the experimentation programs that I ran and implementing something similar, right? Like I appreciate that you specify this is not like some crazy 28 step you know, agentic automation type thing where you've got I don't know LLMs passing tests back to each other and whatever. I think it's fun to think about that sort of complexity, but maybe a little easy to get lost in it, at least right
Yeah,
now.
those never really pan out if you think about it. Yeah, the AI agents are quite dumb. I did see some posts around, like contextual bandits, and then
Mhm.
using like each contextual bandit is an LLM that is an agent trying to optimize itself for customers. These,
I still don't understand the conflation personally. I guess contextual bandits, if we want to just AI wash them, they were always agentic AI, without adding anything to them.
well, you see the tools like Keek and was it CoFrame? Those are quite interesting. Of you pair a contextual or like a multi-arm bandit with an AI. So it's the difference of an agent to like a regular LLM workflow is it's reacting to its environment.
Hmm.
The bandit gives it the reaction to the environment, right? So you can just keep on adding variants, I guess, like keep
Yeah,
optimizing, right?
it's
But I don't
interesting.
really trust it that much.
So another thing that I've noticed from what you're sharing publicly from the Fixer team is that it's not just about having all these cool AI tools and thinking in this very AI enabled way, but you also have some sort of just like ways of working and cultural tenets that I think free up bandwidth for a growth engineer to kind of hit this, one test a day pace that you're talking about. Can you share a little bit about like sort of um, how you keep folks focus and bandwidth available to do this sort of deep work?
Yeah, at a company level, there is this intensity, and we hire for people with intensity. Like I've never worked somewhere where there is this level of focus, and we'll be in a weekly team meeting, and we'll be like, the people over in San Francisco, they are working 996, and they're scaling, they're racing towards AGI, and they crap on Europe all the time. We're the guys in Europe that's scaling it, with Lovable, obviously.
Sure. Yeah.
And 11 Labs, shout out. And everyone's super, like, when you are in a rocket ship from January to now, and you're racing towards 50 next year, and it's very motivating. And the founders are very good at drumming that up.
Hmm.
But when we're hiring as well, we want people that have been in those very grit driven environments of it's going to go bad. And then you're going to get out that trough of sorrow and billion-dollar company. And we want the people that, they're facing loss after loss of experiment, banging their head against the wall with conversion rate. And suddenly they get the win and they have the discipline to go after that. And that comes down to giving them ownership, which is one of our core values. But you can imagine growth engineering, you are in charge of the sign up flow. You own it. So when something goes wrong, it's on you. It's on me as well, but it's on you. Um, and then when you give someone responsibility, they normally their IQ goes up by 10x, right? They're gonna think about it when they go home. They're gonna come up with ideas on the way to work. They're gonna work hard for you because it's tied to them. The rest of the company as well, product engineering, same sort of mindset, same sort of work ethic of what did we ship this week, sales. Everyone is just bought in. It's ridiculous.
Yeah. I think I saw you too talk about like, it's a pretty meeting light culture where you really try to, keep the big chunks on someone's calendar available to actually do the work and not be talking about the work. And, it's not like a lot of approval processes and workflows like that. It's like you said, ownership.
Yeah, we have a focus time from 9 until 2 when no one can book a meeting with
It's
engineering at
intense.
all. And obviously, I get in here quite early as well, at like 7 a.m., so I can get those extra hours as well, mainly for admin stuff now, the team lead and that. And even so, past 2 p.m., I think I have maybe one or two half an hour meetings per day, and that's more to later of the day of like 4 or 5 p.m. So it is just pure focused from start to finish. Additionally, there's less overhead for the engineering teams. There are no PMs because we want entirely T-shaped individuals that are owning a piece to just go after it. So you're not waiting on stakeholders to say, yeah, okay, I'll sign that off, or you should come to the planning meeting and we can plan stuff for the roadmap. It's like, how's the note taker going? The note taker's going, well, we've got engagement up. Great. What are you going to do next week? That's what I'm going to do next week. That's a Slack message. Because there is this level of trust from the CEO downwards of we hire
Yeah.
exceptional people and they're going to do exceptional things. So we should just let
Yeah.
them.
That's a unique to startups, but also unique within startups culture that I think lends itself very well to a successful experimentation program. Like anytime you have that autonomy, you have that trust, and you're managing by objective and not just activity, that's a context in which running experiments is going to be a really powerful tool for anyone working there. And that's why experimentation is going to thrive. I'm curious if you have advice for maybe folks listening who are at larger companies or in the enterprise or someplace that's, where the conditions aren't so ripe for experimentation. Like, what's one tenet that you would hope they could take away from how you're running growth engineering at Fyxer that they could, try to implement, even if it's just within their team, that would help unblock them a little bit and get them closer to your velocity?
I would say radical transparency has been more beneficial for convincing the entire organization to become experimentation driven. Essentially, having the experiments channel was the biggest marketing I could do to get everyone bought in. Because you start posting, 5% on this thing. You're like, oh, that's great. Even if you can't do an A/B test, let's say before and after a big change and the numbers do go up, celebrate the numbers going up. Just be like, we did this thing, the numbers go up. We're very outcome based. Guys, look at me, I did the thing. And everyone's like, yay. Um, that, and you just keep doing that, right? And then people start to take notice. They're like, well, if he's posting the results, I should start posting the results. And then if I have to post the results, it means I have to start tracking the metrics. And then now if I'm tracking the metrics, I want to start A/B testing to make sure I'm actually improving it, right? And you can see how it goes from there. So yeah, the CEO loves the experiments channel constantly. The Slack emojis are a hit of dopamine on my day when they get added to the experiments. So yeah, radical transparency. Just be your own hype man for the first few months until people start to get bought in.
Right on. I think that's great advice. Kameron, thank you so much for taking the time and chatting through how you're running things at Fyxer and how exciting it all is. I think there's a lot of, look, everyone wants to talk about how AI is going to impact experimentation or how we should be leveraging it in our work. I think you have firsthand experience with a pretty, very thoughtful and effective, but also approachable way to use experimentation or to use AI in running experimentation. Like you said, it's not an insanely complicated thing. It's just very thoughtful and kind of built on experience actually doing it. So thanks for sharing some of that with us.
No worries. Thanks for having me.
Thank you so much to Kameron for joining the show and walking us through exactly how they're approaching growth engineering at Fyxer and doing such impressive work. Thank you for watching another episode of Outperform, and make sure to subscribe here at our new home on the Datadog Community YouTube channel so you never miss an update from me or my colleagues here at Datadog. I'm Ryan Lucht, and until next time, keep experimenting.